RAW files are better. At least that's what some people will tell you. But of course, in photography, the answer is actually much more nuanced. There's no such thing as a RAW that's better than a JPEG, or a JPEG that's better than a RAW. The simple fact is, they're different. And today, rather than tell you what's better, I'm going to tell you what's different. Let's get into it. So there is a subsection of photographers that will always spout on about the fact that RAW is better. And there is no denying RAW will give you a better image quality, but that doesn't make it better. What it makes it is more suitable for high quality images. The simple fact is that a RAW file is giving you all the data from your camera, whereas a JPEG is compressing all that data down, adding some details to it, and then outputting a much smaller file. That makes the JPEG faster, easier to work with, and more suitable for some applications. It also means that you can bake in a style. Fujifilm are famous for this. Fuji camera users will tell you how good their out-of-the-camera JPEGs are, and many won't even shoot RAW. But today we're going to explore the differences. We're down on the banks of the River Tyne, and we're going to have a look at two key differences. We're going to be shooting the Sony a7RV. It's set up to shoot in RAW plus JPEG, and the JPEG is in the highest setting, the fine mode. So I'm getting the highest quality JPEGs and going to be comparing them to the RAW files. And the two areas that we're going to concentrate on are the two areas where the differences between the two files will really show up. The first is in white balance and the second is in dynamic range. Now, if you've been around photography even just for a little while, you will know that a JPEG bakes in the white balance. That makes it difficult to edit if you get the white balance wrong or the camera gets the white balance wrong. Whereas the RAW file will allow you to change the white balance. Secondly, because the RAW file is outputting the full range of the sensor, you have much more control over it in post-production. If I was to shoot RAW on this camera at a sports event where I was firing away on continuous mode at whatever speed this does, 10-15 frames per second, I would be able to do perhaps 3 or 4 seconds of shooting, and that's it. The buffer will fill up. I'll have 30 seconds of waiting before I clear it. If I put it in JPEG mode, I will shoot a lot more images before that buffer fills up. So RAW gives us a better image quality, but JPEG has its places. It's a compressed file format. Yes, it bakes information into it, but if you're a sports photographer or a wildlife photographer and you're firing off hundreds, if not thousands of images, you're going to want small compact files that will record to your camera quickly. If I shoot RAW in continuous mode, this camera will fill up its buffer very quickly and slow down to a crawl, and it will take a significant amount of time for that buffer to clear. Conversely, if I shoot JPEG, I will be able to shoot many more frames at 10-15 frames per second, whatever this camera does, and still be able to continue shooting. I will not miss that moment. Secondly, a JPEG is a much smaller file, so it takes a lot less space on your hard drive. Hard drives, if you haven't noticed, are getting extraordinarily expensive thanks to the AI boom at the moment. They've gone up, perhaps doubled in price. It's a ridiculous amount of price. And if you're filling up your hard drive rapidly with bracketed 61 megapixel RAWs, you're going to be spending a lot of money on hard drives. Shooting JPEG, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck when it comes to hard drive space. And you're not going to have to do so much post-production in editing. Firstly, you don't have as much control, but secondly, you don't need that control because of the color, the contrast, the sharpness that's actually baked into it. So this morning, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot a few shots of the time bridges here. We're going to do a few different variations. We've got quite a contrasty scene behind me, a bright sky, a dark bridge. It's going to really test the dynamic range. We're shooting in JPEG and RAW, and we've got the white balance set to auto. What we will then do is cycle through some of the white balance modes and shoot under those different color balances. And then we'll take them all back to the studio. We'll have a little look at them in Photolab 9, and we'll have a look at the differences, and you can decide for yourself which is better for you, JPEG or RAW. So I'm going to crack on, get a few of these shots done, and it's pretty cold out here, so I will do it as quickly as possible, and then we'll head back to a nice warm studio, cup of coffee, and we'll have a look at these images in Photolab. Let's get into it. So welcome back to the studio. So what are we talking about with JPEG and RAW files? Well, we're talking about the fact that JPEG files are much more compact, they're faster to write to the card, and they need a lot less editing. Conversely, RAW files need a lot more editing, but they give you a lot more dynamic range, and you can control more elements within the image, in particular the dynamic range. Now, all of this is just me talking about it. So let's go and have a look at the actual images that I took down on the banks of the River Tyne. And as mentioned, we're going to be using DXO Photolab. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I'm on a little bit of a journey with DXO Photolab and some of their other products as well. I'm still running Lightroom, and I've just paid for another year's subscription with the Lightroom Photoshop package, but I am increasingly moving my workflow over to DXO Photolab, and as such a lot of the videos from now on and recently have been using DXO Photolab instead of Lightroom. Now, is it perfect? Of course not, but there are many things I really do like about it, and I'll be doing a 6-month review of my experiences with DXO Photolab and Pure RAW in a few weeks' time, so look out for that one. If you like DXO Photolab or any of their other software, do be sure to use my promo code, which is JasonRowe15, and I will leave a link in the description below for you to get this software at a 15% discount. So let's get into Photolab and have a look at these images. So as you can see, I have the images here in Photolab, and we're going to concentrate on the underexposed image, the overexposed image, and the white balance, just to see those differences between RAW and JPEG. And we're going to start with this underexposed image. It's technically 2 stops under the metered exposure, and we've been using matrix metering. So it's quite dark, and we want to see how much we can recover. And to do that, we're just going to bring the exposure up. This is the JPEG version, and we bring it up and up, and you can see we have to go a fair way to bring that up to an acceptable exposure. I'm going to bring the shadow areas up just to see if we can get a little bit more life into the image. And we'll try the midtones as well. And as you can see, we do have a reasonable image here. I'm going to do the same with the RAW file. And we'll start with the exposure slider. We'll bring it up. And as you can see, we need a lot less control on that exposure slider to bring that image up. And also, when we use that exposure slider, it's bringing up shadow areas, it's bringing up black areas, it's bringing up the tonal range across the whole of the image, rather than in very specific areas with the JPEG. So these two images now look fairly similar. You can see that there's a better dynamic range in the RAW file almost immediately. But what I want to show you is the side effect of bringing this exposure up in the JPEG. And then we're going to do that by coming into 200% and having a look at not only the sky, but also the girders in the bridge here. They are extraordinarily noisy. Now, it's going to be a very similar story on the RAW file. However, it's a lot less pronounced. The point here is that in Photolab, and I'm not sure in Lightroom, the AI noise reduction will only work at its absolute best if you're shooting in RAW. So in this RAW file, I'm going to put on the noise reduction using the XD3, which is the very best algorithm for Prime. And you can see that that noise has absolutely disappeared. The image remains nice and sharp, and from a 2-stop underexposure, we've got a very good image. Now, if I do the same over here on the JPEG, extraordinarily noisy. However, I don't have access to these deep prime algorithms, I can only use the standard algorithm. So I will switch on the noise reduction and increase the luma to reduce the luma noise in it. And you can see the sky's coming back reasonably well, but we're losing the sharpness and we're still maintaining that noise in those shadow areas. So for an underexposed image, a JPEG is really, really difficult to recover and restore, particularly in the shadow areas where you're going to maintain a lot of noise. Whereas on a RAW file, you can use AOI denoise to bring back pretty much every element of the image. So let's go back to 1:1. And the next images we're going to have a look at are the overexposed images. And we're going to take these two here. This is the RAW file and this is the JPEG file. And again, you can see there is a difference immediately in the dynamic range. They're taken exactly the same time with exactly the same settings, with the camera set on RAW and JPEG. But there is a much better looking dynamic range in the RAW file that's overexposed as opposed to the JPEG. Now these images are not particularly overexposed, as you can see. The metering, the matrix metering has sort of tended towards the slightly dark on this particular day because it was a very, very sort of grey overcast and we have a lot of grey in the sky, so it has sort of tended to underexpose it a little. However, we do have a difference in the dynamic range and we can have a look at that difference by bringing those images up a little bit in brightness. This is the RAW, that's an acceptable image, and this is the JPEG. So they're pretty much matching. You can see there's more contrast in the JPEG than there is in the RAW. But if we bring the blacks down on the RAW a little bit, we will increase that contrast to make it match more or less the JPEG. Now, if I bring the highlights down all the way on this RAW file, you can see we've got loads of leeway, nothing's clipping, everything looks really, really good. If we do the same on the JPEG file, you can see on the histogram we are clipping a little bit to the right. If we bring those highlights down, it doesn't bring it down anywhere near as much. We're not clipping in this particular image, but we are perhaps here. We're getting a little bit of clipping, a little bit of noise over here. But if we look in comparison at the RAW file, the difference is quite remarkable. And the more overexposed you're going to be, the less likely you're going to be able to recover any highlights in a JPEG compared to a RAW file. So in short, you've got better dynamic range. You can recover shadows much better, bring highlights down much better, which is what we were talking about on the banks of the Tyne earlier. That's one of the key differences between JPEGs and RAW. The other is white balance. Now, this image here is very similar to the ones we've already looked at. It's the correct exposure and it's shot on auto white balance. This is the RAW file. This is the JPEG file. Again, slight shifts in color, and you can also see that highlights are much brighter, virtually clipped in the JPEG file when compared to the RAW file. If I bring the highlights down, I've got much more definition in that than if I do the same with this. But we're talking about white balance. Now, the white balance is a very slightly different here, but if I put it on the JPEG and you look at the controls up here, all I can do is control the temperature between blue and yellow. It doesn't actually change the actual temperature, it just changes the cast of the color. So if I slide this to the left, it gets very, very blue, and I slide it to the right, it gets warmer. However, it affects the whole of the image and it doesn't actually change the white balance of the image. Now, if we come back to the RAW file, you'll see instantly we've got an extra control, the tint, which goes between green and magenta. So we can change the actual color temperature, which was shot at 5,700, and we bring that down very slightly. We can make a slightly cooler image, and you can see that we're still maintaining the reds here and the reds in there. The whole image is getting bluer, but we're looking at a white balance difference, not actually just applying a cast to the image. In a moment, we'll have a look at a much more profound example of this. Now, if I bring this to the right, you can warm up the image and you can see that the greens and the reds, they tend to stay more or less as they should be. If I go back to the JPEG file,
and I swing that colour, you can see that the reds start getting introduced into the greens and into the reds of the bridge as well. So it is making a difference. The next one was shot at 7,200 degrees Kelvin. This is a sort of a blue overcast level of white balance. And as you can see, they're broadly similar. There's, again, slightly darker in the JPEG. If I just bring the exposure up a little bit on the JPEG. Now, because this is an overcast day, it actually looks fairly good. So in terms of both images, the white balance on the JPEG and the white balance on the RAW file are broadly similar and broadly accurate. However, if we come to that JPEG file, again, if I want to just change that white balance, just sliding it to the left into the blue, it's sending absolutely everything blue. And again, if I do it to the right, red with everything. Effectively, what we're doing is applying a color cast to it. Whereas if I go to the RAW file and I slide that slider to the left, we're just changing the white balance. Yes, it's looking blue, but the elements of the image that are different colors are maintaining their colors. So as I said, I wanted to look at the more pronounced version of it. And this is the image that was shot at 2700 ISO. Now, it's very easy to get white balance wrong in your camera. And if you do, if you've shot a RAW, you can recover it. If you haven't shot a RAW, you can't. And I think this will be a really prime example. So this is the RAW file. It's roughly 2700 ISO. And if I go to the temperature slider and I bring that temperature slider up, it looks really good. And what we can also do, we can use the color picker, go for a sort of fairly neutral part of the image. Let's go for the grays on here. And that gives us a really nice, well-balanced color image. Now, if we go to the JPEG, we still have a color picker tool. Now, if I go to that same point on the towers here, the gray tower, you can see it's tried to neutralize that color cast, but it's just thrown it absolutely red. If I just reset that image and we move the slider ourselves, let's just reset the correction images. We'll bring the exposure up a little bit to make it a little bit more obvious. And as you can see, we've got the temperature slider here, we've got blue, yellow. And if I want to try and get rid of that blue cast, all it's doing is just putting a yellow cast, and it's virtually no control over the image at all. So that's the three most profound differences between editing JPEGs and RAWs. The dynamic range is very, very different, much more controllable. The white balance is very, very different. If you're not too far off on the white balance, it's okay. But if you've really mucked up the white balance on a JPEG, it's virtually impossible to get it back. And of course, the noise in the shadow areas. You can't control that noise in the shadow areas anywhere near as well as you can on a RAW file.
So I hope that this little tour around Photolab with the images I took down on the Tyne has given you some insights into the differences between JPEG and RAW files. A lot is said about both. This RAW is better, JPEG is better. Of course, neither is better. Both are suited to very particular styles. Now, if you're shooting fast, if you want to get sports or wildlife, if you're time limited or you want to get something up to social media, if you're limited on hard drive space, and hard drives are ridiculously expensive these days, then JPEG is a really, really good choice to make. But you have to be aware of its limitations. Get the white balance wrong, you're not going to be able to recover it. Blow the highlights, you're not going to be able to recover it. So JPEG really does require you to think about your exposure and think about your color. RAW files are kind of a get out of jail free card. You can control that dynamic range to a certain extent. You can control the white balance. You have a lot more malleability within the edit. But of course, all that comes at the cost of space and time. Now, of course, I'm not talking Stephen Hawking space and time here. I'm talking the space that it takes up on your hard drive and the time that it takes you to edit. And those are significant things. So your choice of JPEG or RAW is entirely down to you, the way you shoot. You might shoot JPEG on one shoot and you might shoot RAW on the other. It's entirely down to what you're shooting at the time. If you've enjoyed the software that I've been using, DXO Photolab, as I mentioned earlier, I do have a 15% discount code, and that's down in the description below. So before I go, have a look at this. Now, you know me particularly as a digital photographer. Most of the work that I do is about digital photography, but some of you may have seen some of my very few film-based photography videos. This particular roll of film, which cost me 20 quid, sharp intake of breath there. I am quite aware that film is really expensive these days, but this is going to be used in an upcoming video. And if you've seen recent videos, you might have noticed one about a 50-year-old lens. This roll of film is going to feature with that lens. I'm not going to say any more. If you're intrigued by that, drop me a subscription. If you've liked the video, a thumbs up would be absolutely brilliant. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.